Good morning, everybody. I don't know about you, but that heat wave of 27 out there feels pretty good. It beats 9 and 10 by a good bit. I studied this lesson earlier in the week, and this morning I always go over it again one more time. If you hadn't studied your lessons, you should have. But if you studied your lesson, you know it's about Daniel and the lion's den. So I thought, well, it's so cold. What I'm going to do is just tell everybody, well, Daniel trusted the Lord. The Lord sealed the lion's mouth, and the next morning he was fine. That's right, isn't it? Well, maybe the Lord's going to give us a little more than that today. But lesson 2.3, standing tall on his knees. Standing tall on his knees. Today's the second lesson in this series about God is faithful. And I don't think I'm talking to a group here. I don't know who's online. I hope those that weren't able to be here are doing so. But I don't think I'm looking at a face today that don't believe God's faithful. God's a good God, and God's faithful, and God's always there. I'm the one that's not faithful. I'm the one that, I don't mean I'll wander off in really bad places, but sometimes I'll wander off in my mind, and I'll worry, and I'll be concerned, and I'll fret. And when I really come to myself, I think, why are you doing that? And I know sin's sin. I understand there's no white sins and there's no black sins. Somebody pointed out to me the other day about white lies. Sin is sin. It's either right or it's wrong. But one of the worst sins in my mind that I do, and you probably think, oh, well, you hadn't thought about it, you do. Well, after church, tell me, and I'll try to get straight on them too. But one of the worst sins I do is worry. One of the worst sins I do probably doesn't hurt anybody else other than my family that has to put up with me when I'm going through a worrisome spot, is I worry and I fret and I get concerned about things. I do. I shouldn't, but I do. But if I would ever get to the point that no matter what the den and the pit of lions looks like, no matter what the circumstances is, if I would trust the Lord completely, a faithful God, then there's no reason to worry. He's already there. He's already in whatever situation and circumstance. He's already there, and he's faithful. So today, Daniel had a complete and total trust in God, and that never wavered. And this morning, we're going to go through that scenario in the 6th chapter of Daniel. If you want to turn there, it's a little more reading than what's in your Sunday school text. So the 6th chapter of Daniel is where we'll be today. And sometimes I think that maybe, I may be wrong, but I think that maybe we think that our spiritual and our mental persecution, if you're being physically persecuted today, I'm not aware of it, but our mental and our spiritual persecution, our emotional persecution that maybe we're going through today, we think, oh, this is as bad as it's ever been. It started with us. Why is this world so, well, the world is a mess. But persecution didn't start with our generation, folks. Persecution's been going on all through the Bible in different ways, and a lot of it was physical. And today we're going to talk about some physical persecution that this man went through, and that theme runs throughout the Bible. I do realize that we may not be suffering from some kind of physical persecution today or some kind of, but mental suffering due to a demonic presence in our world today, it's real. Do you agree with me that mental suffering, mental persecution does happen? If we allow the devil to have an inroad, and I'm not bragging on him this morning, but we have allowed the devil and the demons that are in the world today to take hold in our mind, before we know it, we've lost our hold on a faithful God. We've lost our trust in a faithful God. Daniel didn't do that. Daniel took a stand, a public stand, but he took a stand and did things just like he'd always done and remained faithful, and therefore God was faithful to him. So Daniel 6, Daniel the 6th chapter, and the first 3 verses. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give account unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Daniel was in a very, very prominent position under King Darius. He was well thought of, he was well respected, and if you'll study history, King Darius is a little bit a confused person in history. It's hard to find him in history between Belshazzar and Cyrus. That's the two kings of greatness in that era of history. It's thought by some theologians and some historians that Darius was a sub-king or a regional king. I don't know what he was, and it doesn't really matter to me, and I don't think it's pertinent to this story, but this is Sunday school, so we're going to go through this. Whatever he was, he had a position of power that the people respected. He was the authority. So I don't know if he was, some theologians say, well, he was Cyrus. That's what his name was before Darius. I don't want us to get off into that too far. What I want us to understand was King Darius was the king in authority, and he was in power, and all the people of the land listened to what he had to say. So he had set up these 120, if you'll allow me to say it like this, 120 assistants, princes, and then he had 3 presidents between him and the assistants. I don't know if you know how that works. That's called plausible deniability. He had 3 folks, he had a leadership structure of him, 3 presidents, and 120 princes, and then the people. If one of those princes messed up, it was the president's fault. It wasn't the king's fault. You see how that went? But in so doing that, he set himself up for a problem in that he trusted too much in some folks and allowed some decrees to be passed. It was really, if you'll see, I don't think it's what he intended to happen. Verse 2 says, and over these presidents of whom Daniel was first, then the princes might give account of them, and the king should have no damage. He distanced himself. He could get a layer in there where he could say, well, I didn't know that was happening. Trust me, I've seen that happen when I've thought, yeah, you did see it happening. You just don't want to admit up to it. He wanted to be able to say, I don't really think I knew that. But the point I'm trying to get to was, he thought enough of Daniel. Daniel had enough credibility, enough integrity, and enough reputation that he was one of those 3. He was one of those 3. And then it said in verse, then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Daniel's spirit and reputation and integrity that put him in that position caused the king to obviously think very highly of him. Obviously, he was in the king's favor, if you'll allow me to say it. That's the way the Bible used to say things. He was in the king's favor. The king thought well of him. I want us to put some practical applications to this today. We're living based on what Scripture tells us. We are in the world, but we're not of the world. You agree with that? But folks, we're still living in this world. So our reputation, our integrity, and what people think of us in the natural is important to our testimony in the spiritual. I can stand up here and say thus and so and declare all the greatness of this, and then if I go tomorrow and I act a heathen, what do you think people's going to pay attention to? They don't care a thing about the thus and so. They're going to say, he's just the heathen I thought he was. Daniel's reputation, his integrity, stood him in good stead with the king because he didn't waver, because he was faithful, because he was just. He was thought of as even better than the other 2 presidents, and he was, if you'll see that. So this morning, I hope you don't have a lot of them, but your enemies today, let me just couch it like that. Your enemies are the enemy of our soul. Can they find fault in us? Can they find us wavering? Can they find a difference between what we say this is and what we do every day? Are we living in such a way that an error can't be found? You say, well, he set his up on a pedestal. I didn't say I was living that way. I'm asking you. But are we striving today to live in a way that lines up with what we profess? Does what we profess and what we possess, is it the same thing? In Daniel's situation, I believe it was. Verse 4. The other side of that, of the king thinking so well of Daniel, was there was a lot of, obviously, some jealousy and some folks that didn't like Daniel because of his position and because of his standing with the king. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion or fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. They tried, but they couldn't find anything wrong. They couldn't find an error. Folks, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to be living real close to the Lord for your enemy not to find some error. I'm standing here and thinking, oh, they think so well of me, and you think you're so proud I'm standing up here. I got to get y'all moving somewhere a little bit this morning. But you know that everybody don't love me. If you're living in a bubble and you think the whole world loves you, then you need to punch your bubble and let a little air out. Everybody don't think as well of me as I think of me. It's understandable. But there is someone out there, I don't know who they are. If they are, I'd try to go make right with them. Honest, I would. If I knew something's wrong, I don't like to have an ought with folks if I can keep from it. I don't mean I don't. I don't like to have it. But there's someone out there seeing where the error in me is, where the stumble in me is, where the fault in me is. And that's what these presidents and the princes, other than Daniel, sought to find something wrong with him. They were trying to find a chink in his armor that they could bring him down a notch with the king and get him down where they could have things the way they wanted them and not the way Daniel was portraying them to be. And they thought they found that in verse 6 through 9. We're going to get to this decree. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes and the counselors and the captains have counseled together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree, and whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. This is out of the book of Greg, okay? This is not out of Daniel. This is out of the book of Greg. I think these folks were so determined to bring Daniel down a notch, to get him out of the way. Whatever their plan ultimately was, they tried to do whatever it took to make that happen. In my mind, they appealed to the king's vanity of how great you are, O king. We shouldn't have anybody asking anything of anybody other God or any other thing other than you. History tells us at this time that Darius was 62 years old. I can relate to that. He had thought, if I'm ever going to make my mark, I better be making it. I better be getting my fame known, and these folks think this decree would probably help me do that. My point is, be careful if somebody's wanting to elevate you. Be careful if somebody's wanting to pump you up. Be careful if somebody's telling you how good you are and how great you are and how wonderful you are, unless it's your grandchildren. That's okay if they do that. Because they're right. I dread the day that my granddaughters get old enough to think Papa can't fix everything. I know it's coming, but I dread that day. But anytime somebody's wanting to pump you up and make you feel good, remember, if there is any glory in you, it's a reflected glory. It's not me. It's not you. It's the God in us. Daniel knew that, but evidently King Darius didn't, because he allowed this decree to come about. But did you pick up what they said, the king? All the presidents of the kingdom, all the presidents. Somehow I don't believe Daniel was involved in that. I'm not saying Scripture's wrong, but I don't believe all the presidents was involved. I don't think Daniel was involved in this decree, in it getting started and signed. Verse 8 says, Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing. All right, they set it in mind to have a showdown with Daniel. They set it in mind that Daniel was going to be the loser. And the decree is signed that no one can ask a petition of any god or any man for 30 days except for King Darius. That's the only person they could ask. So what did Daniel do? What did Daniel do after that decree was signed and he knew it was there? He stayed. He done just like he had always done. He went and prayed. Verse 10 says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed, and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. I taught a lesson 2 weeks, or attempted to teach a lesson 2 weeks ago on standing, if those of you here remember it. Well, Daniel stood. Daniel stood. He was on his knees 3 times a day, but he stood tall, as our lesson says. He stood tall on his knees. Folks, the tallest place you'll ever be is when you're on your knees before Almighty God. That's as big a person as you'll ever be. It's when you've humbled yourself, not just physically, but you've humbled your heart to a place that you're kneeling before an Almighty God. That's as tall as you'll ever stand. I don't know where this come from, Mama, but I'm gonna let Linda rest today. I'm gonna talk about you. When I was growing up, and I grew up real quickly. I've been this tall since I was 13 years old. Grew like 8 inches in a year or something. It was just sort of freakish, and I know you'd agree with that too. But I was taller than everybody in probably 2 or 3 grades ahead of me. And I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was doing this because I wanted to get back down where everybody else was. Daddy never said a whole lot about it, but if Mama told me once, I think she told me at least 10,001 times, stand up straight and hold your shoulders up. Stand up straight and hold your shoulders up. I don't think she knew she was telling me, but if I slumped, that's what I was going to hear. Well, since I was about 14, I've been standing up straight and holding my shoulders up. That became a habit. My posture, I don't even think about slumping. I don't even think about slouching. That was ingrained in me. It's where I'm going. Are you standing up tall on your knees every day? Daniel did it 3 times a day, just like it said, just like 4 times. So in other words, whatever was happening in the world, we'll leave it like that. The decree didn't mean anything to him. He's still going to pray 3 times a day, just like he had always done. So I'm asking you today, in this vernacular, are you standing up straight and holding your shoulders up? Spiritually. Are you standing up straight and holding your shoulders up, folks? If you're not, something's going to cause you to slump. Something's going to cause you to slouch. Are you standing up straight? I hope you are today. Well, Daniel did. He petitioned his God, not King Darius, not any other God, but he petitioned his God. It said 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. He was not out on the street. He was not up in the palace or wherever the court was. He wasn't in the king's court praying and slapping the king in the face, metaphorically speaking, and saying, I'm going to pray. I don't care what your decree says. He just kept doing what he'd been doing. He stayed steady. He stayed true. He stayed faithful, just like he'd always done. You know, please don't take this the wrong way. I realize that there are people that this is going to sound negative nowhere I'll say it, but now I got to say it because you're wondering what he's going to say. There are people that are a flash in the pan. They make a big, bold announcement, and they make a big, bold pronouncement. And the next time you see them, they ain't got anything to say. I'm talking about God. Some people always got something to say. But I'm talking about spiritually. They make this big announcement about what God's doing, and that's wonderful. I'm glad they're proud of that. But you know what means more, I think, to God, but maybe it's just to me, is somebody that don't make the big, bold pronouncement, but every day. Every day. They're on their knees in Daniel's world 3 times a day. Every day they're standing tall. Every day they're doing what God would have them do. They're faithful. I know there's a place for all of us. I'm just not a big, bold person. I'm a boring, steady person. I am. I've never been accused, trust me, I have never been accused of being exciting or bold. In the children's story about the turtle and the rabbit, I have never been the rabbit. I've always been the turtle, just coming along. Daniel didn't get up in the king's face. Daniel didn't get up in the other prince's face. Daniel didn't get up in the president's face. He just went to his house and stood and kneeled 3 times a day. Faithful. Faithful. That's what we've got to be this morning, y'all. We've got to be faithful if we're going to see this thing through. These princes and the presidents thought they had him where they wanted. Then these men assembled in verse 11 and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. They thought, I can just see him. It worked just like we thought it would. We knew he wasn't going to quit. The king signed this decree. We've got him now. Then they came near, verse 12, and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into a den of lions? They set the king up. They blindsided him. The king answered and said, the thing is true according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Couldn't be changed, it said. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel. Have you ever seen anybody, be it a mother or a grandmother, or I won't use us guys, be it a mother or a grandmother, just say, oh, that child. Have you ever said that? Yeah, you have. That Daniel, all they could think was, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. He's ignoring your decree, king. He's ignoring you. He's not honoring what you said we had to do. What they probably said was, we've done just what you told us to. But Daniel's not. Not that Daniel. He's still praying to his God. Verse 14, then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. I believe the king liked Daniel, don't you? It says he worked till the going down of the sun trying to figure out, this is Neshoba County now. King's trying to figure out how he's going to get Daniel out of this. He's going to figure out how he's going to release him out from under this decree where this praying 3 times a day wasn't going to be a problem. But 15 says, then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed. They said, we know you like Daniel, but we're not giving him special treatment. You said this, king, and we got to all live by it. Even Daniel, we got to live by this decree. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. I'm going to tell you what, I think the king saw something in Daniel that he knew was real. Folks, if we're allowing God to indwell with us but be a conduit through us to someone else, the world's going to see him in us. We're not going to hide God. The world is going to know that what we're saying with our mouth, we're living with our actions. Converse to that is, they're going to see if we don't. They're going to see that we're making big, bold pronouncements about how good God is, but then we don't trust him. Daniel trusted, and the king had seen that. Now, the king was at fault, as we all are at times, but the king was at fault to allow himself to be led down this blind path to declare this decree and allow these people that he trusted, obviously, to put him in a box in a corner where he couldn't do anything other than live by what he had said. He couldn't go against his own decree. But he said, Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Verse 17, and a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Put a stone in place. It was sealed with the king's ring imprint. No one was to touch that. Daniel was in there. Now, we don't know if it was 1 line or 10 lines. We're not told that. It was a den of lions. It wouldn't have to be over one. I'd die of a heart attack. I wouldn't have to be eaten. He'd eat me dead. I wouldn't be eaten alive. But I can just, here, I know I'm doing an awful lot of the book of Greg this morning. If you want to talk out of your book, you come up here and you can talk. I picture Daniel sitting down in that pit, in that cave, or whatever it was, in that den where the lions were, at peace. That's the way I see it. That's the way I visualize it. Folks, I'm real simple. I have to visualize Scripture. I'm not so deep theologically that I can understand the mysticism and all. I have to get it pictured in my mind. I picture Daniel sitting down there being at peace. Now, I also figure he was still praying. But Daniel wasn't, I don't think he was up fussing at the lions and telling them to sit down and behave and leave me alone. I think he was at peace. If he wasn't, this analogy don't work. In your pit today, I don't know what anybody's going through, but in your struggle, in your circumstance, in your face-off with whatever lines you've got in your face, trust the Lord and be peaceful. Trust the Lord and be peaceful and sit down and say, okay, God. Now look here, folks. If you don't know me any better than this, I'll explain something to you. I believe the Lord expects us to get up and do what we can to help ourselves. I've always done that. There comes a point that Greg can't fix it. There comes a point Greg can't make something happen. Greg can't get it where it needs to be. I've got to be trusting and be still and be peaceful and let God. Hard for a fellow like me. It is. If I got something broke, I think it needs to be fixed. If I got something that I can fix, I think you ought to tend to it. I think if there's some maintenance need doing, you do it. You don't put it off, you do it. So sometimes it's real hard for me to wait and let God do it. That's true confession. I probably would have been, I don't know what I'd have done, but I'd probably been scrambling around in that dark pit looking for me a rock or a stick or something just as a last resort to stick in that lion's mouth right when he got to me. Oh, don't look at me so funny. What would you been doing? But in my mind, Daniel was sitting there at peace, praying to a God that he had been praying to 3 times, just like he did, it said, 4 times. You know, just like he'd always done. The human in me would have been terrified. I hope the God in me would have been at peace. Verse 18. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. King stayed up all night fasting, praying, asking for Daniel to be delivered. That's what I think this means. Verse 19, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. Part of my proof, I think the scriptures just proved of how much the king held in respect Daniel, how much he thought of Daniel. He was worried about him. He stayed up all night. In the olden days, if you'll study history, in the olden days when a king was disturbed, he called for the musicians, and they played until he went to sleep. He didn't want music. He stayed up all night, and he fasted. It doesn't say he prayed, but I think he did. He fasted and prayed for Daniel's well-being. Today, in that day, and we'll read on down into this in a minute, in that day we see that King Darius was positively affected by Daniel's life. Folks, today someone's being positively affected if you're living faithful for God. Someone that you might not even know is noticing or observing or watching you. They can tell if you're being faithful to what you say God is. If we live faithful and try to live without error, under God's guidance, somebody's noticing that. Somebody's paying attention to that. And somebody may eventually come to a peace with God because of the life you live. Daniel's life had not been lived in vain. Even up until that night, staying in the den of lions, his life was not in vain. It had affected a lot of people, but it affected this king. Verse 20. I want you to picture this with me. Picture this as the king, the top guy, the king, And he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice. That means he was sad. Cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continue able to deliver from the lions? Can you, I want you to picture this with me now. This is the king that everybody jumps at his command. No matter what he says, it has to be done or he can have you done away with. This is the king, and he comes to that sealed up tomb, sealed up den, and he's saying with a sad voice, Daniel, Daniel, was your God able to take care of you? What he's saying is, Daniel, you still there? Daniel in verse 21 says, Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. In that word, in that time, that was saying, I still respect you and I'm wishing good for you, king. My God has sent his angels and has shut the lion's mouth, that they not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Daniel's telling him, I'm fine. I'm good. All was good with Daniel. The king knew his word, his decree was what put Daniel in that spot. But yet he wanted him to be all right. He wanted him to be okay. Somebody's prayers. Daniel sitting there peacefully, if you can go along with me on that. Or the king up fasting and staying up all night. But somebody's prayers reached the throne room. God sent angels to seal those mouths of those lions. I told you already, I don't know what your lion is today. We all face them. Not every day. We all face something every day, but we may not face a roaring lion spiritually every day. And I don't know what yours is today, but I can tell you there's some angels can close that mouth. If you're faithful to God, we have a God who is faithful to you to take care of you in the good times and the bad times and anything in between. I know that's a bold statement. I know that's a statement I've got to stand on myself. But God is unchanging. No matter if we're in the king's palace as one of the three presidents and everything's great and we got people working for us, or if we've been thrown into the den of lions due to a king's decree. I'm talking about spiritually now. No matter which spot you find yourself or somewhere in between, God's the same. God is faithful. God will take care of you. God is with you today, and he will see you exit whatever that situation is that you're in this morning. Verse 24. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them their children and their wives. And the lions had mastery of them, and break all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. Quit worrying about your enemies. Quit worrying about those that are warring against your spirit. You stay faithful. You do what you've done aforetimes. You be true to God. And I'm not saying God's going to have your enemies eat up by a lion. Please, I didn't say that. But God's going to take care of them. God's way more able and capable of putting them where they need to be, how they need to put, than we could ever do. So just let them be. If you think there's someone out there, and there may be, that's planning or plotting your spiritual or financial or emotional demise today, they want you hurt, pray to an almighty God to take care of those folks, and then you leave it be. I promise you, God doesn't need your help. God does not need your help to seal up a lion's mouth. Then King Darius, listen to this decree now. See where we've changed. Not only did Daniel's enemies, were they defeated, but they were destroyed, and now a new decree. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and earth. Who hath delivered Daniel from the power of lions? A little different decree than we saw a few days ago. A few days ago, these jealous guys had worked a decree across the king's table that he signed that said, can't call on anybody or any God other than me. If you need anything, I'm the guy you petition. You call me, not anybody else. Well, this is 180 degree. Now he's saying that the God of Daniel is who we're going to all depend on. We're going to all trust. We're going to all call on. I'm telling you, folks, if you stay steadfast, if you stay on your knees humble before God, standing tall in that fashion, somebody's going to be affected by it. Somebody in your family, somebody you work with, somebody you live by, somebody you know is going to be affected by your faithful stance to God. Just as positively as they will be affected by our unfaithful stance to God. You know, folks aren't dumb. They know if you're what you say you are. They know if you mean what you say. And they recognize when you don't. The king saw that Daniel didn't move. Daniel stood fast. Verse 28. Not only did Daniel's enemies get destroyed and he be protected, but look at the natural side of this as it ends in this story. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. As I said, there's no way I can know what you're going through today. But God knows. God knows what you're going through physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually and any other LY words you want to put in there. God knows. God knows everything about us. Not only is he going to take care of you and see you through that, but you're going to prosper. Now that I have your attention, I want you to understand what I mean by prosper. You're going to prosper because you're going to be in the spot God wants you to be. I didn't say when the mail rider comes tomorrow there's going to be a check you didn't expect for $1 million. Now, if I get one, I don't care where you're on the county, you're probably going to hear me holler. And I will go to the bank and cash it or deposit it or do something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about prospering in here. I'm talking about prospering spiritually in such a way that, folks, we are faithful to the end. I want to prosper in God's sight. I want you to think I'm doing well, and I am. I'm not missing a meal. I need to, hadn't. But I'm doing okay. We're healthy, thank God. Our pipes hadn't froze in this mess, thank God. Even though we had a little one this morning that spent the night with us, didn't know why our faucet was leaking. I tried to explain to her that, well, when it gets this cold, Papa drips the faucet so it won't freeze the pipe. She said, does your dad do that? She said, no, our faucet don't leak. I guess God's taking better care of them than He is me, because I leak mine. We ain't had a pipe to freeze. We're healthy. We got some, we're going to have lunch. That's not the prosper I'm talking about. The prosper I'm talking about is I want to find favor with God due to my faithfulness that He carries me all the way home. I don't know when that is. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, and it may be 5 years, and I don't know. I don't know. But I want to be in a state of prosperity spiritually with God whenever it is. I promise you, if you'll do as Daniel, if you will stand tall as he did aforetimes, as you will stay faithful to Him, God will bring you out of any den of lines that you find yourself in. I'm confident enough in my God to say that with that much force. I pray this bless you this morning.